King David. All right, so Rahab is really the great-great-grandmother of King David. So why is this important, Pastor Paul? Because I believe, I'm trying to talk to you about the influence that grandmothers or even great-grandmothers can have, right? Now that you remember the story that Pastor Joseph went through about Ruth and Boaz, I can just see Rahab, right? Rahab, a good mother who the son always comes to for advice and counseling. I can just see Rahab say, hey, son Boaz, what you're doing to follow our kinsman's process and your readiness to redeem Naomi and Ruth, that's a good thing. And I can see Rahab saying, Bo, you don't have to worry about Ruth being a foreigner, because you know what? I myself was not from the 12 tribes of Israel. But I believed in your God, the God of Abraham, Isaac, Jacob. I placed my trust in him, and God redeemed me, and I was able to have you. So can you just see how it's entirely possible that Boaz had no qualms of marrying Ruth, a Moabite, not a Jewish descendant, because Boaz's own mother, Rahab, also came through that experience. And I like this story because this is my recurring insight in my sermons on the family. And here it is. I've been saying that no matter what your past sin, and all of us have some sort of a secret sin, and all of us have some sort of a brokenness in your family, God can always redeem and restore you like he did with Rahab, who was a former prostitute. But if she repents and places her trust in God, God can redeem any of you despite your past. And that is the incredible message and hope that the gospel and grace gives us. Okay, the other godly grandmother is a little bit more famous, and her name is Lois, as in Lois, the sweetheart of Clark Kent and Superman, right? Lois. Now, let me read to you 2 Timothy chapter 1, verse 5, because Apostle Paul is writing this letter to encourage young Pastor Timothy as he has to pastor this big Ephesian church. And he says to Timothy, for I am mindful of the sincere faith within you, which first dwelt in your grandmother Lois and your mother Eunice. All right? So, I'm sure grandmother Lois was praying for her daughter Eunice, and was also diligently praying for her grandson Timothy, right? Just like, again, Elder T.Y.'s sermon 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago about the importance of praying for your children. And I want all of us in Regeneration to know that our grandmother, Jean Lee, just wrote a really good article about faith legacy. You can see she's referencing this article about 75% of the kids who grew up in church, like your youth group, by the time you graduate college, nationally, 75% will leave the church. Only 25% stays, and Mrs. Lee is right. In our church, thank God, more than 50% retention rate. But still, she writes a really, really good article. And those of you who can't read Chinese, no problem. Joy Tan is working on our next issue of Regen Times. By the time you guys come back from the retreat in June, you'll see this. This article will be in English. So I urge all of you parents to read this article when it comes out in our next issue of Regen Times. So at this point, a little commercial break, just to make sure that everybody's awake and following up with me, including those of you online. Could anybody solve this riddle? Raise your hand if you can solve this riddle. Why was a baby ant confused? Anybody? Why was a baby ant confused? Because all his uncles were also ants. Okay. Now we're going on to the categories of uncles and aunts. All right. So raise your hand again. How many of you has at least one uncle or aunt that you like? Raise your hand. There's at least one favorite. Oh, that is so good to see that. That is so good to see that. Okay, then the next question is, how many of you consider yourself to be the super cool uncle or you're the savvy auntie? Raise your hand. Don't be afraid. All right. I love the fact that Elder T.Y. raises his hand. That's great. Yeah, I'm going to join your category. You know why? Because back in 2009, when I first joined Facebook, I friended my teenage nephews and nieces. I have a lot. And to my delight, they all accepted my friend request, even when they would not accept the friend request of my own sisters, who are their parents. So I said, oh, you know, if your nieces and nephews, teenagers, if they share with you information that they don't want their parents to know, then that means you're in their cool uncle category. So I pride myself on that. But in all seriousness, I want to share with you now 2 good role models of uncles and aunts, right? And this is important. Okay, Uncle Abram, who was the uncle to Lot. And to bring the beauty of what Uncle Abraham did well, I'm going to give you a modern day translation of what he did, okay? Here's a story in modern day terms that you can relate to. Suppose, high schoolers, you got accepted into Stanford University, but unfortunately, your parents say, I'm sorry, son, we cannot afford the super expensive tuition of Stanford University. We can only afford for you to go to a local community college because you can stay home and save money. And like a good son or daughter, you accept that. But like a good nephew, you give your Uncle Abe, who lives and works in New York City, a call and says, hey, Uncle Abe, I just want to let you know that I really appreciated all those summers you tutored me in STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math. And I want you to know that what you did for me enabled me to actually get accepted into Stanford University, but we can't go because it's too expensive. And then at that phone call, your Uncle Abe says, wait a minute, nephew. I have good news for you. I just got a big job offer as an executive from Google. And I'm going to be moving to Silicon Valley this summer. And I want to take you with me. And not only would I take you with me, I got such a big sign-up bonus. I'll pay for your tuition at Stanford University. Can you just relate to that? That'd be wow, right? So that kind of a generosity from your uncle is what Uncle Abraham did to Lot. Because, as many of you know the story, when God called Abe to come out of his hometown of Ur to go to this special promised land, and I will make you the father of many nations, Abraham obeyed. And at that time, his nephew Lot must have said, hey, Uncle Abram, I heard the good news that God appeared to you in a dream, and he's going to take you to this wonderful faraway land. Can I go with you? Because I want to go with you on this exciting adventure and see the world, right? So that's how much of a generous, grand vision Uncle Abram had. Okay, then I want to give you another story that you may be familiar with and you may not. It's in Genesis chapter 13, and here's what happened. So Abram said to Lot, let's not have any quarreling between you and me, because both of the flocks and sheep and possessions God blessed abundantly. So Abram says, let's not have any fighting between your herders and mine, for we are close relatives. Is not the whole land before you? Let's part company. If you go to the left, I'll go to the right. And if you go to the right, I'll go to the left. I was amazed. I would never do that. I'm the senior one. I get to first decide where I want to go. But Abram, the generous uncle, says, Lot, you get first dibs. You can choose wherever you want to go. And And he ends up choosing what he thought was the more fertile valley of Sodom, near the Jordan River and near the Dead Sea. He thought where the water is, it's better land. And this story you may not know. And after Sodom takes his whole family and herdsmen to this new place in Sodom, he actually gets captured by the king of Sodom. He and his whole family and all his goods. So Abraham, when he heard of it, like a good uncle, he selects 318 of his trained servants, men, and goes and fights the enemy Sodomites and recaptures Lot, all of his women, daughters and wife, and all the goods. And he saves Lot. It's almost like in modern day times, the uncle keeps track of his son who's going to Stanford University and finds out his son got involved with a cult. And he says, I'm going to go and rescue my nephew out of the cult. You know, what we call an intervention rescue. Okay. And then it gets better. This one, you may remember, Pastor Joseph preached on this. When Lot got so used to the glitzy life in Sodom, but the rest of the city of Sodom was so evil, and God warns Abraham that he's going to destroy Sodom. You remember this? Pastor Joseph said, he says, well, you know, if there's 100 righteous people, will you spare Sodom? He says, yeah, 45. And all the way down, and because Abraham really cared for Lot and his family, at least that was his last negotiating offer. Can you at least save Lot and the family? And God ends up doing that, right? So that is how amazing of uncle Abraham was. He wasn't just a cool uncle. He was a generous, caring, and watchful uncle. Okay. The other model uncle I want to point out was Esther's uncle. And can some of you shout out to me, what's the name of the uncle to Esther? Yeah, everybody knew it. It's Mordecai. Now, technically, in Esther chapter 2, verse 7, technically, Mordecai is a cousin to Esther, but their age gap was so big that Esther always considered Mordecai as her uncle. So let me read that to you. Verse 7, Mordecai had a cousin named Hadassah, whom he had brought up because she had neither father nor mother. Obviously, they passed away at Esther's early age. This young woman, who was also known as Esther, had a lovely figure and was beautiful. Mordecai had taken her as his own daughter when her father and mother died. Okay, and you know the story, right? Mordecai always kept a watchful eye over his, whether you call it a cousin or young niece. And when the beauty contest started, Uncle Mordecai advised Esther, don't let anybody know that you are Jewish, of Jewish heritage. So use your name, Esther, your Persian name, and don't call yourself Hadassah, the Jewish name, right? Good advice. And then when Esther was selected as a queen, right? Mordecai always kept in touch. And when the time came when the prime minister of Persia, the bad guy Haman, decided to have a plot to trick the king to write a decree to destroy and kill all the Jewish people, the wise uncle went to Esther and challenged her. And he said, I know, Esther, you're the queen, and I know it's hard for you to go talk to the king without his permission or if he doesn't ask you, but you need to do this because you're the only one who can save our whole Jewish race from destruction. And the very famous Esther chapter 4, verse 14. Because you could be afraid of your own life, but God, who knows that God placed you in this position for such a time as this. So again, these are all inspirational to all of us to see how an uncle or an aunt who's godly can have an influence over our son, our niece, or nephew. So I'll give you an example. You know, sometimes your nephew or niece, they're missing a father figure. And these are valid reasons why they're missing a father figure. Either their parents got divorced, either the father has a trip and spends so much time away from home, or the father can work in the armed services and is stationed abroad, right? These are all reasons why the father could be missing in a young nephew or niece's life. Or if you are in the aunt's position, very similar situation. Your sister who has the nephew or niece may need your help. She gets sick, so while she's sick and receiving these chemotherapy treatments, she needs help for somebody to take care of the children. Or she may be a non-Christian. So when your niece or nephew says, I want to go to the church, but your sister says, I don't have time to go to church. So here's where you, as a Christian aunt or uncle, can get involved in your nephew or niece's life to take them to church and to bring them to receive Christian godly influence, right? So, and then there's this other examples I can give in these kind of situations, but let me move on to this. Cousins are always fun. So because of time, no more jokes. How many of you at least have a cousin that you like and you love to, yeah, right? Yeah, I know. That's great. So pay attention. I'm going to give you 2 examples of good cousins in the Bible that will inspire you. Okay, the first one is Elizabeth and Mary. Elizabeth was the mother of John the Baptist. Mary, the mother of Jesus. They were cousins, and so second cousins. Okay. So let me read to you from Luke chapter 1. Okay, so this is the angel Gabriel appearing to young Mary to announce that even though she's a virgin, she will have a child. And then she says in verse 38, even Elizabeth, your relative, is going to have a child in her old age. And she, who was said to be unable to conceive because Elizabeth was advanced in age, she is in her 6th month. At that time, Mary got ready and hurried to a town in the hill country of Judea, where she attended Zechariah's home and greeted Elizabeth. So what happened was, Mary was so excited to find out her older cousin is pregnant. Not sure well. Okay, so let me continue. The Bible